She said, Bob, when I tried to tell other people about the non-human inside of me back then, they gave me electroshock. You're the first human being to ever believe me, and you have changed my life. I had this whole worldview of trauma-oriented psychopathology, and it exploded. You go to our experts, the psychiatrists, in their white coat, and they'll say, yeah, your brain's broken, you're incurable. I think that is absolutely insane. Hearing voices is a normative human ability. This is normal. It's not pathology.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Return to Weird. I'm your host, Jessa, and in today's episode, I am bringing you a conversation with Robert Falconer. Robert is a pioneering consultant and international educator in internal family systems therapy. Falconer has authored several influential books, including Many Minds Oneself, co-written with IFS founder Richard C. Schwartz. Falconer's book, The Others Within Us, is a groundbreaking work which centralizes porosity of mind as a key component to healing. Now in his mid-70s, Falconer remains an active teacher and thought leader. His work challenges Western therapeutic paradigms and advocates for a more comprehensive understanding of human consciousness. I'm excited for this conversation. Let's get into it. Robert, thank you so much for being here today. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. I find your work and your story fascinating. Thank you for being here.
Great, glad to be here.
Your work really expands the IFS model in a way that I personally see as necessary. IFS asks us to embrace multiplicity, that we're made of many parts. And then you bring in porousness of mind, which is basically this idea that our mind is this open system, right, that is constantly exchanging and impacted by the world around us and perhaps beyond us. I know that this can feel disruptive from a Western perspective, but for me, and I'm sure for so many others, this made the model feel more complete. And so I'd love to start there and just get an idea of what was that journey into discovering these unattached burdens, and then how did that eventually unfold into your understanding of porousness of mind?
Okay. Dick knew about this for quite a while, but he would only teach about it in the advanced trainings, and he didn't want us talking about it in a very public way at all. And, he said, IFS is weird enough, and this stuff's too weird. And so I had a vague idea of that things could be inside a person's psyche that weren't part of them at all. And one time I was on the staff at a training, and I was supervising a trainee working with a client, and the client had something in her that did not seem to be part of her system. So I asked the guy, is it okay if I take over this session? And he was really relieved. He said, please, because stuff can be weird. And what this woman was seeing inside her head was a bloodshot eyeball with the legs of a goat. And it was yelling at her really nasty stuff. You're an idiot. You're ugly. You smell bad. You should die. And on and on and on and on like that. Now, in IFS, we know that pretty much everybody has internal critics. And these are usually beneficial and necessary, and they always have a good intention, so that we can talk to the internal critic and find out what its good intention is, and then sort of join with it instead of feeling we have to fight it. But in this case, when I started having the woman interview that bloodshot eyeball, it had no positive intention. I want to destroy her. And she's disgusting. Nothing, like I want to protect her from taking risks or anything like that. So that's the first thing you do to find out if there's some foreign energy. You investigate its intention. The next thing you do is you have the person ask the thing, are you a part of my system? Are you a part of me? I had her do that, and the thing kept avoiding the question. You wish I was a part of you. I've always been here. All these sort of like lawyer kind of answers, not real answers. And we just stayed with it. Are you a part of her? Are you a part of her? And then after a while, this thing had her say to me, you're supposed to be a teacher. That's a really stupid question. Don't you have anything smarter to ask? And I said, well, it might be stupid, but it's easy. Are you a part of her? And then we did this dance a little more, and then it roared out through her mouth. No, I'm not a part of her. And I'm going to crush you like a worm the same way I'm going to destroy her. This was not a part of her system. And using very simple methods, I was able to help her get it out. And then I wrapped up the session, debriefed the participants, and went to the staff meeting. And I thought, this is so weird. I'm just going to ignore this. This did not happen, because I already had a reputation as a trauma-oriented psychotherapist. I'd edited 4 books on trauma and, you know, on and on and on. And I was 60 at the time. And I thought, oh, I don't want my whole world to. But then she sent me all these emails from the airport going home from the training. And there was one that really changed my life. She said, Bob, I didn't tell you this, but when I was young, I repeatedly tried to kill myself. And I was locked up in mental institutions many times. When I tried to tell other people about the non-human inside of me back then, they gave me electroshock and injected me with terrible drugs. You're the first human being to ever believe me, and you have changed my life. And my response to that was, oh, F. I can't ignore this now. It's like, no, no. So I've followed her for the 15 years or more since then, and she continues to feel it was a life-changing event. Her life did blossom inside and out. This was like, oh, I had this whole worldview of trauma-oriented psychopathology, and it exploded. Now, I think that worldview is still valid. I just see it as, here's this understanding, and it's in a much bigger circle, a much bigger circle of other kinds of events. And because it got known that I was interested and willing to work with these things, I got a lot of referrals, a lot, because most other therapists they'd hear about this, they'd want to go the other way, just like me. And so I've hundreds and hundreds of cases in the past 15 years, and I wrote the book and on and on. And, for a while I was sort of shunned by the IFS community because they didn't want this stuff talked about. But these days it seems to be much more acceptable.
I think that's what I admire about you, because you stepped into that role. I feel like that life was asking you to kind of step into, like it came to you. You were like, I can't ignore this. And that takes courage to step into that, especially given, like you were saying, the context at the time, people were not open to any of this. And I think that that's one of the things that really makes you kind of magnetic. At least that's what really drew me to you. And I'm curious because I know you've mentioned how Richard himself was hesitant about you bringing this more publicly. What was it like to
It was
do that?
because I was very close to Dick and, deeply involved in the IFS trainings and workshops and assisting him. And I sort of got shunned. He did not want me publishing that book at all. But then finally he came around and he did write a foreword to it. And now he's much more public about this stuff. And he's saying, well, I'm too old. I'm not going to focus so much on being acceptable to the psychiatrists. I'm going to say what I see and what's real. And so he's much more accepting. But it did create a lot of distance and a lot of loneliness for me. But I knew it was real because these people would come and they'd report relief and over and over again. So
It's also my understanding, and you would know this better than I do, but I think in level 2 training IFS, they talk about unattached burdens and guides. Is that right?
I think they might now. Back then they didn't
Yeah.
at all. It was level 3 only. And even then it was sort of not said much. One time I was assisting, and this is like more than a decade ago now, probably more than 15 years ago. I was assisting this guy at a level 1, And he said, there are two things we don't talk about here: legacy burdens and unattached burdens. Okay, fine. And so the very first demo he does in front of the whole group, this woman from India had an unattached burden that had been passed down through her legacy. And it was a snake energy. And she started hissing, and her body was waving like a serpent. And the guy handled it really, really well. But I mean, sometimes they couldn't keep this stuff out of the early trainings.
Yeah, that kind of feels like divine orchestration, honestly.
Yeah, it's like, careful what you say.
Yeah. So I know your childhood was exceptionally brutal. It was kind of hard to read about, honestly. As somebody, like, I was feeling it. I was like, oh my God, I wish. I found myself being like, I wish you didn't have to go through that. But at the same time, like, look at what you're doing now. It almost feels like a miracle that you're here doing the work that you're doing. I'm just
Yeah,
curious how you see that now.
I would agree with that. I wouldn't wish my childhood on my worst enemy. Um, Let me just say, we were in a middle-class church-going family, but both my parents were addicts. My father and his live-in male lovers, who lived with mom and dad, would abuse me and my brother sexually, physically, sadistically throughout our childhoods. Mom was sometimes institutionalized in mental institutions. My brother started abusing me when I was around 6 and he was around 8. He committed suicide as a teenager. My father was murdered when I was 21 in an unsolved crime. Wasn't me. I was 1,000 miles away with a lot of witnesses. Um, so I should be dead like my brother, or in prison, or, living in a dumpster, something like that, but I'm not. A lot of it, I'd like to take credit for it, but I think a lot of it was spirit came in and helped me in some crucial transitions. Um, yeah, and it did. I could not have done the work I did with other survivors of abuse without healing from that massive trauma. I also think it sort of set me up to be open to unattached burdens, because when I started, not that long ago, in the 60s and 70s, there was no training about the sexual abuse of children, and the standard position by psychiatry and the therapy schools was it doesn't happen,
Mm.
you know? So all of that was hidden. So I got very comfortable with this idea that all the quote experts can be completely wrong about fundamentally important things. So this made it much easier for me, I think, to accept the whole idea of unattached burdens.
You emphasize this idea of personalism, right? That reality is relational, and relationship is foundation. And I love that because it's decolonizing. And I think that that's really important to bring into this space. It challenges the Eurocentric worldview that isolates the self, treats the self as an isolated unit. And obviously, that same worldview is what built our entire mental health system. And so, how does
Mhm.
seeing reality in this way reshape how we understand healing, spirituality, and even who we are?
Yeah, it is a fundamental shift. Personalism is very important, and it's really rejected by the rational materialists. Now, in IFS, we know in working with our own parts that it goes much better if we treat them not as some drive or something, but as a fully dimensional person, and we form relationships with them. And Dick used to say, well, just pragmatically, therapy goes better if you do this. But then more recently saying, no, they are fully developed persons, and we need to have a relational way of being with them. I think that's also true of these unattached burdens, or these spirits, or whatever it is you want to call them. And the first rule for me is it works better. Pragmatically, it works a lot better. And I'm a big fan of William James, and he had this idea of radical pragmatism, that in the realm of psychology, what's real is what works. That there aren't other standards like a mathematical proof. If it works for people, it's real. And I've come to believe it's even more than that. Ian McGilchrist, who I think is one of the great minds on the planet today, says that the relationship is prior to the relata. The relationship comes before the things that are being related to each other. And actually, in a sense, the relationship creates those things. So, I mean, there's a radical idea of relationality. On the more strictly personalism end, I think the really important thinker is Martin Buber. Now, when Dick and I wrote a book together, I had a whole chapter on Buber, which Dick edited out entirely. And Buber's great book on this subject is I and Thou. And Buber says there are two basic words, but they're not words, they're word pairs. I, it, and I, thou. And he says all of our relationships, all of our ways of being in the world can be classified as one or the other of those. And these are the basic words. Um, he also says the I in an I-it relationship is different than the I in an I-thou relationship. It's like McGilchrist was saying, the relationship creates the beings who are related. Early on, Buber said quite clearly that all evil in the world comes out of I-it relationships. If you're relating to something else as a thou, you you are not evil with it. He also said that the relationship to the divine is the first and primary I-thou relationship, and that for him, this was sort of a basis of morality and a basis of how we are in the world, this personalist stance. And it's immensely unpopular with rationalist materialists. It's a whole different worldview.
Why do you think it's so unpopular? And I know that's a big question because you can take that in many directions.
Yeah. I don't want to try and explain their attitude. But I think it's frightening for people. You know, like this idea of porosity of mind is very frightening for people.
Yeah, can you say more about the porosity of mind?
Okay. Yeah, this is...
And feel free to get like kind of out there with it because I love that kind of a thing. Yeah.
Well, I'll go back to William James for a minute. He said, people are like islands in the ocean. If you just look, they look really separate. But if you look more deeply, they're all bumps on the same seafloor. And when we start thinking our minds are porous, it allows all these things that Western science tries to get rid of are all of a sudden sort of to be expected, like extrasensory perception, psi abilities, you know, all this stuff just sort of makes sense, of course. And if you just back up and think about it for a minute or two, every living system is surrounded by a semi-permeable membrane, a porous membrane that lets in some stuff and keeps out other stuff. Every cell, every ecosystem, every organ of your body, if it was this rigid thing, you'd be dead. So, but we sort of rule out our minds from this. There are quite a few people, and I'm one of them, that believe that this belief that our mind is not porous is the fundamental root cause of the epidemic of mental illness we're suffering today. And a lot of people have traced the history of this, and we could go into all of that. But if you have this belief that your mind is a citadel, and that this metaphor comes from Tanya Luhrmann, a great anthropologist, she calls it the citadel model of mind. If you think that, you're going to think everything in your mind is your property, it's private, nobody gets to see it, and it constitutes your identity. And that this looks powerful. It's not powerful. It's incredibly brittle, and it can shatter very, very, very easily. You hear one voice in your head and you think, oh my God, my brain's broken. And you go to our experts, the psychiatrists in their white doctor, in their white coat, and they'll say, yeah, your brain's broken. You're incurable. You're in trouble. Um, and I think that is absolutely insane. Our minds are porous. Hearing voices is a normative human ability. And there have been all these studies, like there was a study of couples who'd lived together 45 years or more, and one partner dies. 80-something% of the surviving spouses heard the voice of their deceased spouse. This is normal. It's not pathology. I mean, it's so blind. So blind. Socrates, the origin of Western philosophy, heard voices his whole life. And so Western rationalism is based on the thinking of a guy who heard voices and based his thinking on what the voice told him. That's so ironic, so painfully ironic. But,
Yeah.
and most of the rest of the world has this porous idea of mind. You know, the Plains Indians, they talk all my relations. They have relationships with other beings and they exchange stuff, and they can hear voices and talk to spirits and talk to ancestors. And a lot of them believe they can talk to their future selves too.
Yeah, totally. And I don't think it's really out there, honestly, but I guess that's just me. I mean, in indigenous peoples, they see the river as like a being. They see the earth as a conscious being. And I would agree. But what do you think would happen to therapy, the whole mental health care system, if we were to accept that porousness of mind is a reality?
Well, I think it would transform it tremendously and for the good. You know, basically, IFS has gotten the idea of multiplicity of mind. We're made up of all these different parts. We're not one unified processing thing, and explored the implications and potential of that. And that is revolutionizing psychotherapy. I think porosity of mind is the next step beyond that. And it it normalizes spiritual experience. It normalizes our meeting guides. And also dark energies like the one in that lady I was talking about. Um, also, let's see. Okay. Tanya Lerman, who I mentioned before, has devoted her most of her long career to studying psychosis and spirituality worldwide. And quite a while ago now, she did a study on psychotic episodes in California, Agrigana, Chennai, India. We spend something on the order of 1,000 times more in this country. Guess who gets the worst results? We do. Whoopee! And the really sick thing is we are actively exporting our methods of treatment. And in India, it's especially sad because the government there, in the name of Westernization and modernization, is actively working to destroy the traditional healing temples. Um, Dr. Lorman, thinks that the reason we get these terrible results is that we have this citadel model of mind. So we hear a voice and we go, oh my God, my brain's broken. That's the end. You know, wham, I'm sick, pathology, meds, chemical imbalance, all that kind of stuff. And that's very depressing. And I think 100% wrong. She's an Agrigana. They have what she called a cosmocentric model of self, where they think that they are part of the whole cosmos and they expect to have relationships with the trees and the groves of trees and the forests and the animals. So they start hearing voices. It's not this shattering thing. It can be difficult and life-changing and wonderful and horrible and all that stuff, but it doesn't mean their brain's broken. So they can accept and work with a florid psychotic episode. And, these are also visionary episodes. So they can hold this in a way that allows it to become a positive experience, or allows what's really positive about these visionary experiences to shine through. Whereas the way we deal with them, it just obliterates all the positive aspects. In India, she said they have what she calls a sociocentric model of self. Like, IFS says we are a family inside. A lot of the traditional Indian thinking takes that as like the baseline, but then you're also a member of this family of spirits. Your ancestors, all these others, places, all the gods. So it's actually good sometimes when you hear voices and you have these florid experiences of non-ordinary reality. So it's not shattering.
I was going to mention how it's it's the space that you're operating from, right? Like how much access you have to self energy will determine what you attract and let in because of the porousness, right? So if you're operating from this place of disembodiment or you're in a state of survival, and you're more likely to attract an unattached burden, right? And then whereas maybe if you're self-embodied, you're more likely to attract helpful presence or guides. Is that?
I wish it was that easy, but I don't
Yeah,
think
go
it is.
ahead. Yeah, tell me more.
Very often, these darker energies attack the light bringers. So, I mean, I know that I've experienced a lot of attack from some pretty dark energies when I started working with a lot of this. And the more I work with this, the more attacks I got. So I don't think it's that easy. But you're right, basically. The way Dick puts this is anytime you're out of your body, these things can get in. And that all trauma, you will be out of your body. And really, sadly, being raped almost literally injects these dark energies into people. Another thing that was unexpected to me, but appears true, kids who had a lot of surgery early on have a lot of these things because anesthesia, you're out of your body. These things can get in psychedelic experiences. I want to say I think psychedelics are a wonderful, wonderful tool. I started working with psychedelics in 1967. I believe in a lot of ways they saved my life. Um, so I'm not against them at all, but they do make the boundaries more porous, which lets in the helpful ones and the harmful ones. And I want to say, I think as I've studied this worldwide, the vast majority of spiritual presence experiences are positive and sought after, and people go to incredible lengths to be able to meet and form relationships with spirit. I mean, they starve in the desert for years, all this incredible stuff. It's very, very valuable and wonderful. And I think psychedelics demonstrate this really clearly. Roland Griffiths from Johns Hopkins University and his whole research team did these studies because many, many people doing DMT containing psychedelics like psilocybin, which he worked with, they would meet conscious agentic beings. This was not expected. Most of the researchers, like Rick Strassman at the University of New Mexico, he expected some kind of Zen Satori, peaceful, calm, enlightenment kind of. That's not what happens most of the time. They meet these beings and start having relationships and conversations with them, which was really disturbing to some people. Anyway, Griffiths did 2 big studies of these. 80+% of the contact was positive. The most commonly checked descriptors of these beings was teacher, guide, wise person, stuff like that. So I think that shows that just sort of naturally, when people open the semi-permeable membrane all around their psyche, most of what comes in is really wonderful. Like many people doing ayahuasca meet Mother Ayahuasca herself. And people doing ayahuasca get really nasty stuff in them sometimes because that's almost always done in groups and very often not really well contained or protected. So I guess that's enough on that question.
I'm really curious your view on this. Do you think there's a distinction, or it's an important distinction between self and self energy?
Mm.
Because I have a lot of views on this. Actually, interestingly enough, the week that I was preparing for your interview this week, and I felt like I was receiving insights, and I was like, I don't know, maybe his work just like opens doors or something. But I was like really having this contemplation around the absolute and the relative and the relational field, and I was trying to understand that in the context of IFS language. I don't know, maybe I could just share. I don't know if you would agree, but to me it feels like self is pure consciousness, and then it feels like self energy is pure consciousness that is in motion, oriented towards relating.
Be if that language helps you or helps people you're working with, great.
What do you think?
I try and stay away from any theoretical orientation. And I just invite the clients to let me know what metaphors they prefer,
Mm.
what's their system, what's their worldview. I worked in Pakistan a fair amount just by chance, all online, and they talk about gin. I'm fine talking about gin. That's no problem. I don't want to try and impose any of my distinctions or my ideas on anyone. There's some stuff I would like to say about self, though. You know, self in Dick's system is it's who we really are, and everybody has one no matter how badly you're hurt or what you've done. It can't be destroyed or even damaged. There's just stuff gets in the way. It's like the sun on a really stormy day. No matter how bad the storm, you know, your house is blown down, all of that, the sun is fine. You know, all you need to do is when those clouds part, that will shine forth from within you. And Dick says that's true of self. And I think he's right. And that's a revolutionary and life saving message for a lot of people who were badly abused. Everybody else was telling them, you're damaged goods. You know, I expect a miserable little life. So, anyway, Dick uses 8 words that start with C to describe self: curious, compassionate, calm, creative, connected, clarity, couple more. I think it's way too small, way too small. He was dumbing that down so that he wouldn't freak out the academics. We need words like wonder, awe, vastness, luminosity, ecstatic, and more, transcendent. Well, you know, it is a much bigger concept than that. Now, Dick is saying now that we each have a self of our own, sort of, and in that way, it's like a particle. But there's also an experience of self that is more like a wave or more like a field. And he even is saying now that, you know, this big field of self, there may only be one. It may all be just one self. So I think if you start thinking of it that way, that the self we have in ourselves is like our gateway to entering this vast field of self, and that it really is characterized by these much, much bigger qualities. That I think you're starting to enter the potential of this.
So kind of like the universal field. I mean, there's so many words that we could use to describe it. I kind of want to ask this, but I feel like maybe you're not going to want to answer, but I'm just going to shoot my shot. Do you see that as God or source? I know spirit is like, to me, spirit is consciousness in motion. It's right. It's like, it's consciousness in motion. To me, at least, that's how I see it. But source or God feels like, to me, that feels like self.
I try not to put any words on it at all. I
Yeah.
think any word you can put on it sort of limits it and narrows you're putting blinders on that you don't have to have on.
Yeah, 'cause it's ineffable.
Yeah, well, and
Yeah.
also the kind of question I would wanna ask instead of that is, when you're getting close to this kind of experience, what do you feel in or around your body? And as you sense that, does it pulsate, vibrate, move around? Or is it really solid and just in one place? Is it heavy or light? Does it have a color?
Mhm.
As you focus on these experiences, do you hear any sounds? And help people really develop their inner sensorium.
Mhm.
A whole branch of study in psychology that's called interoception, which originally meant the ability to sense our body's state inside, like how you know you're hungry or they say a lot of people say autistic kids have very poor interoception, and that's why they flap their hands because they literally don't know where their hands are, so they flap them so that they can know where they are. So there's interoception down from that very basic sort of level, and it goes up. In anthropology, they talk about this as inner sense cultivation. You can learn to navigate, and it's trainable. You can get better and better at sensing your subjective universe. And some famous anthropologists have suggested that shamanic initiations are actually intensive trainings in inner sense cultivation. People are learning to navigate this inner universe, which I think is actually larger than the external one. But that's, who cares? Um, Tanya Luhrmann says prayer is actually a very sophisticated form of inner sense cultivation. So there's this entire spectrum of learning how to navigate this subjective realm from the crudest interoception all the way up to the subtleties of prayer. And it is trainable, which is really important. Also, in the past 5, maybe 10 years now, there've been all these studies that show poor interoception is pretty much universal in people with eating disorders. It's like 70% of people with borderline personality disorder. Treatment-resistant psychosis with psychotic features, 80%. It's transdiagnostic. So I spend a lot of time with clients working on helping them hone and develop and deepen their interoception skills. And it's exactly those kinds of questions I was wanting to ask about spirit. As you're feeling that, is there a center in your body, or is it evenly spread throughout your body? Is it to your right, to your left? Really, really. And if you start doing this, I think very quickly you realize this is a vast, vast world in here. You We tend to just go, overdone. I saw that. No, it's vast, deep, expansive, and there's a lot of rewards for learning how to navigate in this realm.
Mhm. Yeah, we're not taught to be curious about our inner world at all.
No, we're taught, they tell kids with imaginary friends, get over it, grow up. And now there's all this evidence that kids who have imaginary friends mature more quickly. And ironically, precisely in the area where people would say they drag behind in developing social relationships.
Hmm.
So
Mine were
our
fairies.
our attitude toward childhood spiritual experience is terrible. Terrible.
Mhm.
We invalidate it and crush it.
Did you have any imaginary friends?
Oh, this is very intense abuse. My whole childhood was
Yeah.
abuse, but I don't know, it might be too much for your audience. My father was a sadist. He and his friends, they were sadists, into sadomasochism and extreme forms of it. So he would do a lot of things to hurt me, cut me with knives, hurt me with pliers, put cigarettes out on me. And I got very, very good at getting numb, getting anesthetic. But there was one thing I could never, ever numb out, and that was being suffocated unconscious. I think this is hardwired biology. You know, when you're being suffocated to the point of passing out, your body just sends out its biggest alarm. When he realized this always really got to me, that's what he did a lot. Um, and sometimes when I was in that unconscious state, I met a merciful female presence. I never got to see her face or her clothes. I just felt cradled in the arms of this merciful female presence, which was the only loving presence I had in my childhood. And I so loved her and appreciated her, but she kept sending me back where there were a couple men abusing me. And I just pleaded with her and pleaded with her, don't send me back, don't send me back, don't send me. And she just kept doing it. And I ended up cursing her and screaming at her and yelling at her, and she disappeared for many decades.
Wow, decades.
Yeah, and I spent a lot of effort working to reestablish that contact. So I don't know if you'd call this a childhood friend, but it was a life-saving experience for me. I think the fact that I could meet that person, um, probably saved my life.
Yeah, she showed you a love that you hadn't experienced
Yeah,
before.
yeah, and a little bit of mercy, or a lot of mercy and kindness, and I could so easily have turned into an alcoholic,
Mhm.
like my parents.
Have you been able to establish connection with her again?
To a degree, yeah.
Mhm.
She doesn't speak, but I can feel her presence.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Do you have any do you have a name for her? Not that you have to share it, but, like, do
Yeah,
you
I don't share those things,
Yeah.
and I advise people, don't share the names of your spiritual contacts unless they specifically tell you to do it. They're very private, very
Mhm.
intimate,
Yeah,
and keep it protect. Cast not your pearls before swine.
yeah.
You know, don't just be throwing this out there all over the place. It deserves to be treated with privacy and respect and care, and kept in a safe, protected space within you. And another thing, because I work with a lot of clients, if I named any particular spirit or goddess or god, I would alienate half the people on the planet because of how much hate's in the world now. So I don't do that.
I see. Is that why you're maybe careful about the ontology of things?
I don't know. I don't want to be associated with any specific religious tradition.
Yeah. How would you how would you define your or describe your spirituality, your connection to spirit?
Okay. I have several ways of relating. I'm kind of weird, and now you're going to start finding out how weird.
No, I want this.
Every
Yes.
every morning, I get up around 4, and I spend 3 hours interacting with spirit and my parts. And I have relatively structured ways of talking to my parts, the ones who are currently active. And I also have relatively structured ways of praying. But I also go outside. I live in the woods and I dance with the trees. And that's a very powerful way of relating to spirit for me.
I love dancing with the trees.
In my body, it's a real relationship, and it's very visceral, very present time. And I also have a practice that's much more linear. I just do written dialogues. And I've been doing this for more than a decade now. I've accumulated over 3,000 pages of them. And actually, I've got a book coming out middle of next month just called Spirit, which is summaries of these dialogues. And I just started. A trusted teacher told me to do this. I thought it was really stupid, but I respected her so much I did it. And I was stunned at the results. I just wrote my name and then wrote a question and then wrote spirit and wrote an answer. And I just kept doing that for 10 minutes. And at the end of 10 minutes, it was clear that something inside of me was smarter than I am. You know? So I was just stunned. So I've kept that up. So that's another way I've been able to connect with spirit on a daily basis. And I've done some Vision Quest stuff and, various other things, but the daily practice is this checking in. I often listen to music and dancing with the trees and
Mm.
doing written dialogues.
Yeah, what you're describing sounds a lot like automatic writing.
Yeah, but, um, let me put this in a framework. The way I think of it in terms of spiritual practices, there's a whole continuum from really, really, really highly structured ones. Like you memorize a biblical prayer like the Hail Mary and you say it 6 times every morning, totally structured. Or in Buddhism and Tantra and Hinduism, they have deity yoga where you do a detailed visualization of a deity. I did this with the Tibetan Lama, the blue medicine Buddha. All the appearance and the aromas, and you invite that down into your body. Very very structured, precise. And Saint Ignatius of Loyola, his spiritual exercises are very structured. At the other extreme end of that is what in the West is usually called quietism. Madame Guyon, Molinas, Father Molinas, where it's just like you get wide open and you become a plowed field receptive to the rain. Absolutely no, no direction at all. Completely openness, receptivity, surrender. I think there's a middle realm too. And I think automatic writing is way over there by Madame Guyon and Father Molinas and the quietism end. It's just you're totally gone and you do the automatic writing. The realm I'm in is in the middle. I'm having a dialogue. I'm an active partner. And Jung's active imagination was like this. There are quite a few other spiritual practices that are like this. I think we need all of them. I don't want to say one of them's bad and one of them's good. I think we need all of them at different times in our lives and in our in our day even. Um, but for me, the basic one is this interactive, relational one of this kind of form of dialogue. Carl Jung talked about this in an interesting way. I think he said there are 3 forms of imagination. One is fantasy, where it's all about the things we wish we had and our ego dreams. So that's trivial. That doesn't matter. And then he said, then there's passive imagination. And he said, dreams are the great example of this. We receive dreams. We're not, unless you're doing lucid dreaming or something, they just come. You receive them. And he said, also passive imagination, psychosis. These images and voices and stuff just take you over. And then he said there's active imagination, which he developed as a practice to use with his clients. And he did it himself. He saw beings. He saw Philemon and Elijah and Salome, and he would have dialogues with them and ask them questions and interact, and they'd do things together. And he found this was the most helpful for his psychotherapeutic practice, and he was a psychiatrist. So I think we need more development of this middle area of active imagination. So it is sort of like channeling, but no. It is sort of like automatic writing, but no. So that was kind of a long answer to a short question.
No, I appreciate the context. And I think, yeah, you're right. It's important. Automatic writing is just being completely open to whatever wants to come through, but you're not having that relational dialogue with it. So, Spirit, your book that's coming out, is a dialogue
Well,
between you.
it's a summary of a dialogue. The dialogue was over 3,000 pages, so I didn't want to try and publish that. Uh, so I've summarized it as best I could into, I think, 230 pages or something. So it's not in dialogue form, but it's the summaries of what I learned in dialogues. I want to say something about automatic writing.
Mm,
Amazing, amazing stuff has come through automatic writing. There's one guy, a Brazilian, Chico Xavier. Nobody's ever heard of him in America,
mm,
which is really sad. He did automatic writing. He only had a third grade or fourth grade education. He would never take money for his psychic work, and he worked as a low-level postal clerk his whole life, but he would see people and do this automatic writing at night. He wrote something close to 400 books with automatic writing. 90 of them have been published in Brazil. Many of them, they've been translated into more than 20 different languages. There's about a dozen you can get in English, and they're amazing, absolutely amazing. Millions and millions of books sold all over the world, and nobody in America has ever heard of this guy. And
yeah.
that just shows how prejudiced and narrow-minded we are. His most probably most famous book is called No Solar, which means our home in Portuguese. It's been made into a movie which you can get for free on YouTube called Astral City. It begins with the death of the hero, and it follows him through the afterlife until he is ready to be reborn again down onto the planet.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, and Chico is very out there, and he was incredibly popular in Brazil. He was a national
Mm.
hero. They had a, magazine, contest, who should be remembered as the greatest Brazilian of the 20th century, and Chico was way up there at the top of what people thought. And many of the spiritists in Brazil know a great deal about the kind of stuff I've gotten interested in, and I think Brazil may become like the Tibet of the 21st century, in that they are a source of great wisdom, and they have many, many traditions which know about this realm much better than we do.
And is he still alive?
No, no, he died
Oh,
quite a few
okay.
years ago. There was another guy who was almost Divaldo Franco, also channeled, I don't know, only 80 books. Having written 9 or 10 now, writing a book is a big deal. So someone doing 400 while they're working full time is like, it's impossible unless you're getting some kind of special help.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you this question about because and this is kind of veering off a little bit, but you mentioned that parts are like these they're nested inside one inside the other like fractals. But then it goes the opposite direction, right? So we're all kind of just parts in these bigger systems and even bigger systems. And there are these like intelligent fields that organize our behavior. Really curious what you think about this. Like, what do you think determines the field we end up nested within? Why this family? Why this culture, this lineage? My sense is it's not random. I don't believe in randomness.
Mhm.
Curious what your thoughts are on that too.
Okay. I try and stay away from why questions.
Yeah.
'Cause almost always they take me up in my head into
Mm.
my rational thinking part, and they take me out of that realm of interoception.
Mm.
So if I'm having some experience of wondering about my place here, I try and just start noticing what's going on in and around my body as I'm experiencing that wonder, and to turn in a completely different direction. I think there's really good evidence now that any any sufficiently complex system has to be made up of largely encapsulated subroutines that are sparsely interlinked. If you think about computer intelligences, they're like this. They have to have these dedicated subroutines that are relatively sparsely interlinked. And of course, our minds would be like that. So we're this system of parts. Each one of those parts inside our system has the same structure. So it is a system of parts, largely encapsulated, sparsely interlinked parts, and down and down and down.
Mhm.
I don't know how I've gone down 3 or maybe 4 levels parts of a part, parts of a part of a part. I think that's about as far as I've gotten. So 3 level. It goes the other way too. We're parts of a family. We're parts of a species. And on. I don't. I'm curious about those higher reaches and finer reaches, but they're not pragmatically important in terms of relieving the suffering of myself or people around me. So I make a big effort to discipline myself. All that stuff is fascinating, but I put blinders on intentionally, especially when I'm working with people. They came to me not for some kind of exploration. They came to me because they're suffering and they want me to do my best to help them with their suffering. So I stay focused on that instead of trying, even if something really fascinating comes up in them, I go, no, that's not the contract. I'm here to do this. And
Mhm.
it's my sort of ethical duty to stay focused on this and this only. And if I start going, to, well, why would that be? And, it detracts from their healing. And I really don't want to do that. Parts of me do want to do it, though. I tell you,
Yeah.
I'm real curious.
Where can you allow yourself to do that out? Because obviously you don't want to bring that into this space when you're working with a client, because then you're just satisfying your own,
Yeah, I do it when I'm
curiosity.
teaching, I do it in supervision groups, I do
Mhm.
it because in supervision groups, there'll be a session, and then we'll have 30, 40 minutes to debrief and, teach and stuff like that. So there are spaces I can do it in. And you read my book, I do a great deal of research.
Mhm.
The bibliography, I think, is 32 pages long, and I read all that stuff. I'm I'm kind of fanatic about doing my homework,
Yeah.
you know? It
Yeah,
cou
I can see that.
it's not like there's a lot of discipline involved, but it also really, really fascinates me.
It is fascinating. You're better than me. I go down the rabbit holes all the time. Like I want to understand it intellectually, which I know is a part of me that can get in the way sometimes. So
Yeah,
working on it.
and I think if you focus on the interoception end of it, understand
Mhm.
in terms of your own internal subjective experience, you'll find much more rewarding answers.
Yeah, I
Satisfying.
totally. Well, it just feels good. It just feels good to be in that, to sit in that. But then I want to come out and I want to understand it. It's a
Yeah.
dance. It's a delicate dance.
Yeah.
Would you be open to sharing, and it's okay if not, but I have to ask, your most non-ordinary experience, the most maybe magical or mystical experience you've had?
With a client or
Just personally.
well, I think meeting that merciful female presence when I was a child was pretty out there. I've had over 200 psychedelic experiences.
Ooh,
So
would you like to share one of those?
they're ineffable, and you're asking me to F the ineffable.
Mhm. Yes.
Do it.
Yeah.
But they say it's life transforming, and it's really allowed me to expand into being a much bigger being.
Hmm.
I'll talk about one that I think is, this is way beyond what is acceptable in therapy land. I've come to think that as if we start exploring this subjective realm, there are actually vast inland seas or swamps of human suffering. And that if we don't work with them positively, these dark energies can use them as fuel to destroy other people. And an example of this is I was working with actually, it was a psychologist who brought in a student of theirs who they were working with, young, relatively frail looking Chinese woman. And what was coming up in her were the spirits of the Chinese people killed in the Nanking massacre. Most Westerners don't even know what that is. In the 1930s, Nanking was the capital of China. The Japanese troops came in. There were 1 million people there. When the Japanese troops, the commanders just let them do anything they want. It was an incredible massacre and mass rape and unbelievable. There were about 200,000 left. So more people died there than died in Nagasaki or Hiroshima. Way more. Maybe Nagasaki and Hiroshima combined. And everybody knows Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Nobody knows Nanking. So all these spirits, these suffering spirits, started howling and screaming. And this young woman was hearing the screaming and howling of thousands and thousands of people. And we were able to help her, let some of this come through her, and then she could step aside and help these spirits to go on because they'd been trapped here. And I think she's doing a lot, but she isn't hearing screaming voices anymore all the time, which is kind of stressful, to put it mildly. So, I've had a lot of other experiences like that. Some with the trenches of World War I, some with the Irish potato famine. Another
Mhm.
thing we ignore. 1/4 of the population left the country, another quarter died. That's half the people gone, in a relatively short period of time. Tremendous psychological ancestral burdens, a whole ocean of suffering. And I think there's
Mhm.
ways we can work with this that helps them drain so that they're not there.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's interesting. People tend to think like, "Oh, that's in the past." And it's like, "No, it's still alive. It's
Yeah,
still alive right now."
yeah.
And nobody's looking at it.
There is hard science behind this now, thank God.
Mhm.
Rachel Yehuda at, I think it's the Cornell Medical School in New York, the Icahn School of Medicine, I think it's called, over 500 peer-reviewed papers. She clearly shows that the cortisol chemistry, the stress chemical, is different in the children and grandchildren of people who are in the Holocaust than it is in the general population.
Mhm.
I mean, there's all sorts of other hard science around these kind of legacy burdens. So it's there. It's just how far do you want to go with that? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I looked into this with the witch hunts. I think a lot more women die than is reported,
Yep.
especially if you're a woman that's from like European descent. You definitely have women in your lineage that were burned at the stake, and that's living inside of you. I think it shows up as like fear of expression, speaking your truth, fear of taking up space, like all of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the witch hunts were actually a concerted effort by the governments that were forming at the time and the churches to wipe out the last remnants of native European shamanism. And there was a vibrant tradition of native European shamanism that was pretty much wiped out then, but only in the center of Europe. Eastern Europe, Northern Europe, like Ireland and Northern Scotland, my ancestors were from Northern Scotland, this didn't get wiped out there. That shamanic tradition sort of survived. And so also in Eastern Europe. And I think, this esotericism now and the hermeticism, I think we don't have to go to some other culture to find a living shamanic tradition. We can just look more deeply in the mirror at ourselves and at our ancestors, and we can reconnect in this way.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have to do it that way because we don't have access to those kinds of practices in this culture. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, before we wrap up, is there anything else that feels alive for you to speak on or touch on or bring into this space today?
Well, I mentioned the book Spirit I got coming out. I have another book that's a second edition of an autobiography I wrote 20, 30 years ago about my recovery from sadistic trauma. I put it out the first time under a pseudonym. This
Oh,
time I
wow.
put it out under my own name. Um, and then the major book project I'm working on now is about the necessity of spirit and healing. I don't think we heal, and we do not heal from major trauma without finding some way to connect with spirit. And I think that's individual. Some of the Sufis say there are as many paths to God as there are souls on the planet. And I think that's about right.
Mhm.
There may be more than that. And that's why I don't wanna mention mine or I wanna elicit whatever is growing and alive in the person I'm talking to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
When are these books coming out?
The one titled Spirit should be out on the 12th of December.
December?
Yeah, next
Oh,
month.
wow.
Yeah, and
Oh,
the autobiography ought to be out maybe February. It's at a proofreaders, so my
I think
words.
online it says September 2026 for Spirit.
Well,
Okay, cool. So it's coming out soon.
yeah,
I'll be
yeah,
looking forward to reading it.
and I had that one on Swedenborg come out in the spring, IFS in Swedenborg, and I just found out the other day that that's the best-selling, book in the Swedenborg Publishing House.
Congrats. That's
So,
amazing.
yeah, well, they don't sell very many books, but it's doing very well in that small world.
Very cool. For anybody that wants to learn more about you, where can they
Okay.
find you? And I'll make sure to link everything in the
Yeah,
show
thank
notes.
thank you for asking that, I always forget. robertfalconer.us is the website, and there's lots of free stuff, and there's a YouTube channel, and I've been on, I don't know, 40, 50 podcasts now, so you can watch enough of me until you're totally bored.
Yeah, you do a lot of podcasts. I've seen a lot.
And I did another one this morning,
Oh, you
so
did? Yeah. Are you ever going to get tired of these?
maybe. Um, I'm really trying to focus more and more on this big book on, trauma, spirit, and healing, because I think that's really important. But I'm really old, I'm 77, um, and I feel there's certain things I really, really wanna do, and so I need to husband and focus my energies,
Yeah.
uh, more.
Well, thanks for being here. It means a lot and for sharing your wisdom. I really appreciate you, your depth, and what you bring to this world.
Okay, thank you so much, Jessica, and good luck with your podcast.
Thank you. Really appreciate that.